I'm Judah Leblang, and the pieces I'm doing today are from my book, Finding My Place, One Man's Journey from Cleveland to Boston and Beyond. And the first piece, Voices in My Head, comes from my one-man show, My Life in the Middle Ages. You should be writing more. You should be writing better. If you were writing more, you would be writing better. Most successful writers have an agent. Most successful writers have an agent and have published books long before they are 48. I am over the hill, closer to 50 than to 40, closer to old age than to youth. I may not get to old age. I will not be discovered, though I hope to get something published before I kick off. I could kick off at any time, but not before the Cleveland Browns win the Super Bowl or the Indians win the World Series, which would keep me around to the next millennium, because Cleveland teams do not win, rarely win, almost never win. Why do I care? I do not live in Cleveland, haven't lived in Ohio since 1986, so maybe, possibly, I should just get over it. I live near Boston, with its winning teams, championship teams, and here I am identifying with a bunch of losers from a Rust Belt city that has been shrinking since the Second World War. Why can't I identify with the city where I live now, a city on the rise, on the move, on the Atlantic Ocean, instead of one on a smoky river and a dirty lake? Genetic coding, DNA, stubbornness, tribal feelings, a sad childhood, bad childhood, moments of pain. Strep throat, measles, mumps, hit by a car, scarred by a fish tank. My body is a map of accidents and bad decisions that tie me to the place I come from like a lasso, a square knot, or heavy engineer's duct tape. My father was an engineer, a Clevelander born and bred, as was my mother. She was not a sports fan, and my dad followed the Indians only when they won, but I can blame them and the Jewish people who bred them, for my low self-esteem, my deep sense of place, my Midwestern roots, which cannot be torn up by sheer force of will, but require an excavator, a backhoe, or some other earth-moving equipment, which my nephew could identify at age 4, but which I cannot name. Name what? Middle age. I am middle-aged, which is not for pussies, not for sissies. But I am a sissy in the gay community, where aging is valued slightly less than facial boils. Growing less young, which my younger brother, who is happily married to a woman he met at 17, says beats the alternative. Sometimes I'm not sure, but lately I think so, as I've learned to be happy, or at least less sad. Sad is not so bad. After years of depression, not the lie in bed, stay under the cover sleepiness of some, but my own version, the style I learned from my mother, blending her anxiety and my own shame, restless, nervous, can't sit still, I've calmed down some, can breathe some, can see better. Better. Life is getting better, and I'm getting more Buddhist or Judist, accepting what is, especially if it's not too bad. I sweat the small stuff a little less, mild perspiration instead of a conniption fit. Fit. For the day, for the week, for the gym. I should be working out more. My doctor said 40 minutes 4 times a week, but the Stairmaster is a drag, though it does have a TV monitor and 42 channels, and I'm locked into cable, which I do not have at home because I'd watch too much TV, and I can view at the gym and not feel guilty because I am working out. Working out. Things are working out. The Indians may not make the playoffs, will not win the World Series again this year. This is to be expected, to be accepted, to be borne stoically, not to complain, kvetch, bitch. I want to change teams, change dreams, find a boyfriend. A boyfriend. I have boyfriends, but not a lover, a companion, the one. I have my cat, a calico named Santosh, whose name means contentment. She is often content, though not lately. She's not happy with me. I'm away too much like my father was, and why didn't I call? Still she forgives me. purrs her mechanic purr and climbs on my chest, a deep, rumbling, meditative om that soothes me and brings me back to this moment in which I am still alive. Papa's place. My mother often said, "Your grandfather's going to die in that store." And now, on a stifling day in July 1975, 2 months after my Uncle Jerry's death, it appears she might be right. I pressed the accelerator and careened down Harvard Avenue, propelled by the scribbled note she left on the kitchen counter. Papa rushed to St. Alexis, collapsed at store. "Hurry," she wrote, and I do. A nervous 18-year-old, steering my grandfather's rusted-out Chevy Bel Air through the Mount Pleasant neighborhood toward Slavic Village on Cleveland's southeast side. As I drive, I inhale the smell of tobacco that clings to anything Papa touches, his scent of camels mixed with musk. On special Saturdays, I rode with my grandfather to Harvard and East 71st Street, where we entered the dusty recesses of Harvard Drug, Papa's pharmacy. Once he told me of his arrival in this close-knit Polish community in the 1920s, when Jews were no more welcome than rabid dogs. But after decades of mixing medicines for the factory workers and their hard-working wives, the store was open every day for 53 years. They'd made him an honorary member of the Union of Poles, a tribute usually reserved for Polish Catholics. As I near the hospital, I'm 12 again, peering out from behind the front counter of the store. I stand next to the gold-plated cash register, turn its useless crank, and make change off the top, carefully counting the coins of Papa's customers as they buy their Polish newspapers, their Clark bars, their Tarryton cigarettes. The front door is usually propped open. A ceiling fan stirs the mill-dusted air. Old folks come in for coffee, sit at the front table with my aunt, as Papa and his brother, my great-uncle Itz, fill their prescriptions in back. Papa works steadily, his sleeves rolled up. I hear my name mentioned, and one by one the customers come over to say hello, to shake my hand or grasp my shoulder. "Your grandfather's a fine man," one says, and I nod shyly. Now, as I raced past Odziemski Hardware, Holy Name Catholic Church, and Komorowski's funeral home, I imagine Papa laid out at Berkowitz-Kuhman, the Jewish funeral home in Cleveland Heights, but know his soul would be wandering here among the fading double-decker houses of the neighborhood. In the hospital waiting room, my mother and grandmother sit huddled on a couch. Above them, a gold cross gleams in the dim light. I know I'm too late. Papa was buried in a new cemetery out in Chesterland, far from his home in suburban Beachwood and his store in the city. Most of the locals didn't come to the funeral. They came to the store instead, recalling my grandfather over cups of coffee and slices of sweet babka, the older men smoking, their shirts sweaty in the summer heat, the women clad in babushkas. Ben helped us out when we couldn't pay a doctor, gave us the medicine on credit, one man said, and I knew Papa had done the same for countless others during the Depression and World War II. Meanwhile, at the front table, Uncle Itz sat mute, weak from grief and his recent stroke. No one wanted to buy my grandfather's little business. Finally, after a month of running the store, filling prescriptions with a rotating cast of druggists, my parents sold Papa's customer list to a competitor for $2,000. Then they brought in an auctioneer to strip the old store clean. A grizzled West Virginian with a no-nonsense manner, he had me empty the bottles of their precious liquids. Soon the floor was covered with sea green and purple glass shining in the dusky light. Sometime later, the building was destroyed, and with it all traces of my grandfather. 25 years later, I returned to the neighborhood. Now integrated, blacks and whites walk sidewalks cracked and edgy, past storefronts, some empty, others with new names and owners. A few, a camping supply store, a Polish restaurant, remain from Papa's day. Taking it all in, I sat in a coffee shop half a block from the old store, a brighter, remodeled version of the greasy spoon Papa and I visited on the way into work, him for coffee black, me for a coconut cream donut. Then we'd walk to Harvard Drug, Papa leading, me trailing in a cloud of his blue smoke. The proprietor, a balding newcomer to the neighborhood, didn't know my grandfather, but the old woman who shuffled by, rosy-cheeked, her head covered by a pink babushka, probably did. As I stood in the parking lot of a new Rite Aid drugstore where Papa's pharmacy used to be, I pictured the old woman buying candy as a young girl, greeting Uncle Itz and my grandfather under the lazy ceiling fan, Aunt Lottie making change from the broken gilded register. The old woman approached the Rite Aid walking slowly. The doors opened with a pneumatic whoosh, and the woman was sucked inside, into the brightly lit, well-organized store where no one sits, drinks coffee, or reads Polish newspapers. Cleveland is a Plum, 1981. So much remains to be written of a city doused in ash. The gates of shuttered steel mills and empty docks echo in eerie silence. Purgatory on a cold gray lake fed by a flammable river. Slicing winds and knee-deep snows embrace the locals like a lover. Anything was possible here, so my parents said, a 1940s boom-boom Midwestern town, brewing beer and smelting steel, a mecca for the working man. In 48, the Indians won the World Series, Truman beat Dewey, and Cleveland could do no wrong. Sixth largest city, anything was possible here. Then came the riots, dreams delayed too long, progressive Cleveland standing still, ethnic feuds among the clans, free-flowing fear led whites to a promised land outside the city limits. Our first black mayor came and went, beaten by the system, and I was born in the suburbs of this once great city that smelled of smoking wood and broken dreams and a lake called Dead. Cleveland has the football Browns and the baseball Tribe. Blacks and whites mix freely at the games, driven by that hunger to be the best, but we never are. The Indians lose most every game, most every year, and I love them more fiercely for that. I sit on splintered wood and cheer them on as fans grow sparse and fall winds come to our city cold on its stagnant lake. The Cleveland Press was my newspaper, my daily route. I ate the sports pages before dinner. Now the printing presses are still forever. The plain dealer is left alone, a plain paper for a shrinking city. Cleveland is a plum, the PD crows, or dried like a prune, I think. Anything was possible here, so my parents said. And why was it my fate to watch the rotting of those dreams echo in eerie silence?